Whether it was intended or not, the gameplay changes made to Final Fantasy XIV in patch 4.0 have shaken things up in a big way. Today we're going to talk about some of those changes and how they affect the gameplay loop of FF14 for the better. We're going to use the warrior as the focal point for today's conversation because that is the first job that I've gotten to level 70. And just so there are no surprises, I love the changes that were made to the warrior. They are nerfs in a very real sense compared to what the job was before, but even though it is weaker, it feels significantly better to play. And that's because you're making more interesting decisions. And besides that, the weaknesses of the warrior can be fixed with a few potency adjustments. So the first thing we're going to talk about is stance dancing. That is the act of changing between offensive and defensive stances. And this was a core part of the warrior's gameplay loop in the 3.0 Heavensward series, and it is still a very important function of the class. And right now, I'm going to keep doing that till it's over. I'm trying to use the right terminology here. So I just switched over to Deliverance in preparation for the 3 ads that were about to spawn, activated Inner Release to cut the cost of Beast Gauge actions by 50%, then used Decimate 3 times followed by a Fell Cleave because all the ads were dead. And that felt really amazing, and that is what stance dancing is. It's switching to your offensive stance when you need it, but it's also making sure that you're meeting the right criteria so that you're not losing out on potency when you do so. If I had switched without having Inner Release and Infuriate ready, I wouldn't have gained anything. I would have actually lost damage, but because I'm paying attention to my abilities, I'm looking at what I have available to me, and I'm making use of all the tools in the kit, I'm whooping ass. The way things were in Heavensward, I would have switched stances and I would have done my decimates all the same, but there wouldn't have been as much thought process in it. So the gameplay loop, it's still there, but it doesn't feel as solidified. It doesn't feel as rewarding when you do it correctly. It's just, oh, well, I'm going to switch and I'm going to do my damage, as opposed to I'm going to manipulate all of the tools in the kit, and then I'm going to do the big damage. The next thing for the warrior's gameplay loop is something that holds true for all of the tanks, and that is taking damage and mitigating that damage. And that feels better as well because of the addition of the roll actions. They got rid of some of the fluff abilities like Foresight. Anticipation was a Dark Knight thing. They had some other version of that. I believe it was called Dark Dance. It had some unique mechanics, but those are gone now. They made Rampart available for all tanks, so they normalized things to help keep it more streamlined. But for the warrior, it feels like a huge buff to the way they're able to mitigate damage. Rampart is significantly better than the counterpart that they had, which only protected them from physical damage. And then of course we have the tried and true Inner Beast. Ever since the 2.1 update, that has been a very fantastic ability to use. It deals big damage, heals you for a portion of the damage dealt, and it also gives you 20% damage reduction for 6 seconds. But what makes it feel better in 4.0 with the new changes is that Infuriate's cooldown gets reduced by 5 seconds every time you activate one of your 50-point spender abilities. So Inner Beast, Decimate, Steel Cyclone, and Fell Cleave. Which means if you're going through a boss fight that doesn't require you to block a lot of tank busters, then you can keep a relatively steady stream of Inner Beast going, which means your healers won't have to work as hard and they'll get to do more DPS. And that stands for damage per second for anybody that is not fully aware of MMO terminology. But my point for this section is that the defensive capabilities of the warrior feel better because of the 4.0 changes, and defending yourself is an important part of playing a tank, and if that feels good, it's a step in the right direction. The final aspect of the warrior's gameplay loop is another one that is shared across all the tanks, and that is the act of maintaining enmity or threat or hate, whatever you want to call it. It's the stuff that makes the enemy want to smack you in the face, and that has become slightly better with the 4.0 update, and that is because of the addition of Onslaught. I do understand that the mutual consensus for this ability is that it's complete dog shit, but I do not find that to be true. The reasons why people don't like it is because it is not a damage increase and it consumes part of your beast gauge. I have mentioned this in a previous video, so I do apologize for anybody that's heard me say this before, but Onslaught, in my opinion, is not supposed to be a button that you press just to increase your damage. A lot of people are suggesting that they reduce the cost of it or they increase its damage, but those I don't think are healthy things to do for the gameplay of the warrior. And the reason is because they already have a damage option for off the global cooldown for 20 resource points. And it's called Upheaval. The warrior doesn't need two abilities that have virtually the same function with slightly different properties, and that's what would happen if they changed Upheaval into a gap closer that increases your damage output for 20 resource points. It would be very difficult to differentiate that button press from the Upheaval button press, and that's not necessarily what you want. You want each button press to feel unique, and that's something that you see in the warrior's basic rotation. Each combo is fulfilling a different function. The Storm's Eye is increasing your damage. The Storm's Path is increasing your resource gain. Butcher's Block is increasing your threat generation. They all feel significantly different, and that's what you want across all of the skills. You never want two buttons to do virtually the same thing. It starts to get kind of boring at that point. But of course, that's just my opinion on the matter, and with that said, I'm not saying that everything is absolutely perfect. There could definitely be some potency adjustments made to the warrior to make it feel a little bit more solidified, to make the sacrifices that you have to make when stance swapping a bit more reasonable. But all in all, it's a very, very fun tanking class, and it's a very powerful one at that, and it's one that I hope to see in the highest levels of raiding gameplay in Final Fantasy XIV. I know for certain I will try and push it as far as it can go. I don't raid all that much because fuck it, that's why. But I do participate in the content. I do the primals and all that good stuff. So I'm going to be out there, and I'm going to be using my axe, and I'm going to be having a good time. On that note, if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment, but please say much words with beautiful kindness. Don't say anything mean, because I'll cry, and that doesn't feel good. You don't want to live knowing that you made a person cry over the internet. What's wrong with you? Are you a savage? How dare you? How dare you? But seriously, the name of the game is Final Fantasy XIV. There's going to be more Final Fantasy XIV content on this channel in the future, so if that's something you like, of course, again, subscribe. Look, the name of the channel is iBluairJgR Gaming for Comedy. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.